Paul Newman was famous for his blue eyes and movies, but at home he was a completely different person. Now his daughter is telling the truth about what happened behind closed doors, the drinking that almost destroyed their family, the guilt he carried after his son's overdose, and the shocking confession he made on his deathbed. This story will change everything you thought you knew about Paul Newman. He was born in Cleveland Heights, Ohio, on January 26, 1925. His family was a mix of cultures, and his father, Arthur Newman, was Jewish and the son of Hungarian and Polish immigrants, and his mother, Teresa, was of Slovak descent. His parents ran a successful sporting goods store in Shaker Heights, a wealthy suburb of Cleveland. The family was financially stable, and Paul had a good upbringing, but he still faced discrimination. Shaker Heights was mostly Christian, and anti-Semitism was common at the time. In high school, Paul was an athlete and a good student, but he was not allowed to join a fraternity because he was Jewish. Because his father was Jewish, it was an event that stuck with him and probably affected how he later thought about justice and equality. At the same time, he had a creative childhood. When he was only 7, he played Robin Hood in a school play, and that small part inspired him to become an actor. He later joined the Cleveland Playhouse's children's theater program and acted in plays like St. George and the Dragon. He didn't see acting as a career yet, but he liked it, and he graduated from Shaker in 1943. After graduating from Heights High School, he went to Ken College to study economics, but World War II interrupted his studies that same year, just before he turned 18. He joined the U.S. Navy with the goal of becoming a pilot, but doctors found that he was colorblind during training, so he was reassigned as a radioman and rear gunner for torpedo bombers. In 1945, he was stationed in Hawaii getting ready for combat missions with his unit assigned to the USS Bunker Hill, an aircraft carrier involved in the Battle of Okinawa. But right before they were sent, one of his pilots got an ear infection, which kept the rest of the crew from going. Days later, kamikaze pilots attacked Bunker Hill, killing hundreds of sailors, including many from Paul's unit. If not for that ear infection, he probably would have been one of those sailors. He finished his service and received medals, including the American Area Campaign Medal and the World War II Victory Medal. But more importantly, he left the Navy with a new perspective because of that experience. He was given a second chance at life and wasn't going to waste it. After the war, he went back to Kenyon College, but his interest in economics faded there. Instead, he joined the drama club and performed in plays like The Front Page, Charlie's Aunt, and The Taming of the Shrew. His role as a man dressed as a woman in Charlie's Aunt stood out, bringing much needed laughter to the campus after a terrible fire. He also wrote and directed a satirical student musical that made fun of campus life. Even though he did poorly in school, Newman found purpose in theater. Looking back, his expulsion from Ohio University wasn't the end of the road. It pushed him towards something better. After graduating in 1949, Newman's life took a different turn in 1950 when his father died, leaving him in charge of the family business, the Newman Stern Sporting Goods Store in Cleveland. The store had been open since 1915 and was one of the biggest in the city, but Newman had no experience running a business. He ran away from it for 18 months, feeling trapped in a life he didn't want. Later, he admitted that he was running away from that world instead of embracing it. In 1951, he took a big step. He left Cleveland and enrolled at the Yale School of Drama, where he planned to study directing because he still didn't think he had what it took to be an actor. But after a year there, he moved to New York City to train under Lee Strasberg at the famous Actor Studio, where he learned method acting. In 1953, he got his first big break when he got a part in Picnic, a Broadway play written by William Inn. He wanted the lead role of Hal Carter, but director Joshua Logan thought he wasn't right for the part, so Newman was cast as Alan Seymour, a supporting character. It wasn't the part he had hoped for, but Picnic was a big hit, running for 477 performances and getting great reviews. It also introduced him to Joanne Woodward, a young actress working as in both of them didn't know it at the time, but this meeting would lead to one of Hollywood's most famous marriages. Newman also worked as an understudy for the lead role, preparing himself for future starring roles. Picnic may not have put him in the spotlight, but it did put him on the film industry's radar. Then came his film debut, and it was a disaster. In 1954, he was cast in The Silver Chalice, an epic biblical drama in which he played Basil, a Greek artisan whose job it was to make a silver chalice for the Last Supper. A turning point in his career, but the movie was a mess. Critics called it dull and over the top, and Newman later said it was the worst movie made in the 1950s. He was so embarrassed by his performance that when the movie was set to air on TV in 1963, he bought an ad in Variety apologizing for it and begging people not to watch it. That plan didn't work. His apology made people curious, and the show got more viewers than expected, despite his disappointment. The movie still earned him a Golden Globe nomination for Best Actor. Even when he failed, people saw Paul Newman's potential. His rise to fame wasn't just talent. It was also timing, luck, and an unmistakable presence. His big break came in 1956 with Someone Up There Likes Me, a movie that almost went to James Dean. Dean had already been cast as boxer Rocky Graciano, but Dean died in a terrible car accident, leaving the role open. Newman stepped in and made what could have been another boxing biopic into something unforgettable. The way Graciano played a man who was both tough and vulnerable, angry and charming, felt real, and showed Hollywood that he was more than just a good-looking newcomer. The film's gritty style was ahead of its time, and later classics like Raging Bull and Rocky were influenced by it. The cast was also full of future stars. Pier Angeli played Graziano's wife, and Steve McQueen and Robert Loggia made their debuts in smaller roles. The movie won 2 Academy Awards for Best Cinematography and Best Art Direction. It made the movie more powerful and showed that Newman had what it took to be a leading man. 2 years later, in 1958, he played the part that made him famous, Brick Pollitt, a former athlete who is struggling with alcoholism and personal demons. He starred opposite Elizabeth Taylor, and their chemistry on screen made every scene feel electric. The story was about family dysfunction, greed, and hiding emotions. Newman played these themes very well. His performance as a brick with quiet intensity that showed pain beneath his cool exterior connected with audiences and critics, praised his ability to bring depth to the role. He earned his first Academy Award nomination for Best Actor, proving once again that he was more than just a good-looking face. The film was a huge success, nominated for 6 Oscars but not winning any. It cemented Newman's status as one of Hollywood's biggest stars. The decision to film in color had an unexpected effect. It brought out his striking blue eyes. From that point on, Newman's eyes became as famous as his acting by the early 1960s. In 1961, he starred in The Hustler as Fast Eddie Felson, a small-time pool hustler with big dreams. The movie was stylish, intense, and full of moral dilemmas. Newman played the character with a mix of arrogance and vulnerability, making him one of the most memorable anti-heroes in movie history. The movie received 9 Academy Award nominations, including one for Newman. Then came H.U.D. In 1963, Newman played H.U.D. Bannon, a selfish rancher who was at odds with his father. Unlike typical Western heroes, H.U.D. was reckless and morally flawed, making him a new type of character for Hollywood. The movie won 3 Academy Awards and earned Newman another Best Actor nomination in 1967. In Cool Hand Luke, he played Luke Jackson, a rebellious prisoner who refuses to be broken by the system. Jackson's defiance made him a symbol of resistance, and Newman's performance turned the movie into a classic. A cultural landmark, what we have here is failure to communicate. The line came from St. Martin's character, but it was forever linked to Newman. He was nominated for another Academy Award, which added to his growing legacy. People couldn't stop talking about his blue eyes. They became as famous as his movies, but Newman never let his looks define him. He once joked that his tombstone should read, "Here lies Paul Newman, who died a failure because even though his eyes turned brown, Paul Newman had already built a career that went far beyond his looks." He met Joanne Woodward in 1953 while they were both studying for the Broadway play Picnic. At the time, Newman was married to Jackie Witt and had 3 children, and Woodward was dating famous people like Gore Vidal and Marlon Brando. They hit it off right away, but it was only on a friendly level at first. Newman later admitted that he was drawn to her right away because she was more modern and independent than he was. In 1957, when they got back together to co-star in The Long, Hot Summer, their relationship took a turn. By that time, Newman's marriage was falling apart, and his relationship with Woodward was growing stronger. Soon, they couldn't hide what was going on between them. In 1958, after getting divorced, Newman married Woodward in Las Vegas. They honeymooned in England before moving back to start their life together. Even though they were happy about their new marriage, Newman later admitted he felt guilty about how he handled his divorce. He didn't explain it well to his kids, but his love for Woodward was so strong that he once said she gave birth to a sexual creature inside him. That intensity shaped their marriage for the next 50 years. Being together for 50 years was a big deal, especially in Hollywood. Their love was strong, but their marriage had its problems. Newman famously said, "I have steak at home, why should I go out for hamburger?" to show how loyal he was to Woodward. It also gave hints about the temptations and the problems they had. One problem was his alcoholism, and another was the death of his son Scott from a drug overdose in 1978. The grief was terrible for the family. Their daughter Melissa later said that her parents worked hard to stay together even during the hardest times. To get away from the stress of Hollywood, Newman and Woodward moved to Connecticut to have a quieter life for their 3 daughters. Newman often praised Woodward, calling her the reason he became a singer. Stayed grounded while they had their own careers and always supported each other. This balance became one of the strongest parts of their relationship. Their work lives often overlapped. They worked together on 16 films, starting with The Long Hot Summer in 1958 and including Rally Round the Flag, Paris Blues, and Mr. and Mrs. Bridge. One of their most famous projects together was Rachel, Rachel, which Newman directed and Woodward starred in. The movie got great reviews and was nominated for several awards. Both of Newman's movies, Man in the Moon, Marigold, and The Glass Manager, were hits because they brought out the best in each other. Newman once said that their success came from a mix of lust, respect, and patience, which was a rare combination that kept both their work and their marriage strong. Their love was real, but it wasn't perfect, and they were honest about the fact that marriage took work. Newman once said that all the bad things that happened, the betrayals and the problems have kind of evened things out. Over the years, their daughters said that their parents got into heated arguments but were just as determined to make things right. Woodward reportedly didn't like Newman's famous hamburger remark because he thought it made their relationship sound too simple. Newman's drinking also put stress on their marriage at times, but therapy, persistence, and a deep understanding of each other helped them get through it. They also found joy in different hobbies, like Newman in race cars and Woodward in knitting, and shared a love for Paul. Newman was more than just a Hollywood star. He made every role feel real, no matter what genre it was. In 1969, he co-starred with Robert Redford in the movie Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Newman played Butch Cassidy, a smooth-talking outlaw with a quick wit, and Redford played Sundance, the quieter but deadlier half of the duo. Their chemistry made the movie unforgettable. It wasn't just another Western. It was sharp, funny, and full of charm. Audiences loved it. It made over $100 million worldwide and earned Newman an Oscar. Newman's silly performance gave the movie its heart and showed that even bad guys could be likable. 4 years later, he and Redford worked together again on The Sting 1973. This time, they were con artists in Chicago in the 1930s, pulling off a complicated scam against a cruel crime boss. Newman played Henry Gondorff, an experienced hustler who knew all the tricks in the book. He made the character smooth, confident, and always in charge. The movie was a huge hit, earning 7 Academy Award nominations. While Redford carried most of the story, Newman's performance added depth and style. These 2 movies cemented his place in Hollywood and made his partnership with Redford one of the most famous in film history. By the 1980s, Newman was showing that he could play deeper, more complex roles. In Absence of Malice 1981, he played Michael Gallagher, a man who was wrongly accused of murder by a journalist. The movie was more than just a thriller. It looked at the dangers of Newman played Gallagher as a man trying to clear his name. He brought a quiet intensity to the role that earned him a nomination for an Academy Award for Best Actor. Then came the verdict. In 1982, Newman played Frank Galvin, a failed lawyer looking for redemption. Galvin takes on a medical malpractice case, and for the first time in years, he has a chance to prove himself. Newman made every moment of Galvin's struggle feel real. He showed Galvin's hopelessness, his determination, and his slow return to the movie. Self-Respect was nominated for 5 Academy Awards, including one for Newman. He didn't win, but his performance is still considered one of the best of his career. For years, Newman had been nominated for Oscars but had never won. He had been nominated 7 times without a win. In 1986, the Academy gave him an honorary Oscar for his lifetime achievements, almost as if they thought he'd never win. But the next year, in The Color of Money, 1986, he played Fast Eddie Felson again, just like in The Hustler. In 2011, 25 years had passed since he first played Eddie, and Newman made sure that the character had changed. Eddie was older and wiser, but he was still hungry for one last chance at greatness. He took a young pool player played by Tom Cruise under his wing, but this wasn't just a story about mentoring. It was also about pride, ambition, and what it means to get old in a world that never stops moving. In 1987, Newman won the Academy Award for Best Actor, which was a long overdue reward for this role and everything else he had done. Even though he was getting older, Newman never lost his touch. In 1994's Nobody's Fool, he played a cranky but likable handyman in a small town named Sully Sullivan. Sullivan was a man full of regrets, but Newman gave him humor and warmth, making him one of the most relatable characters of his career. He was 69 years old, but he was still doing some of his best work, and the performance earned him another Academy Award nomination. His last live-action role was in 2002's Road to Predestination, in which he played an Irish mob boss named John Rooney. As Rooney, a man torn between love and duty, his relationship with his surrogate son, played by Tom Hanks, was the heart of the movie. Newman played him with quiet authority, making every word feel heavy with meaning. He was 77 years old when he earned his last Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor. It was a fitting end to a career that had lasted more than 50 years. Paul Newman was one of Hollywood's biggest stars, but his life was far from perfect. Behind his fame, he struggled with self-doubt, being a good father, and an ongoing battle with alcohol. His autobiography, The Extraordinary Life of an Ordinary Man, showed a side of him that not many people knew. Even his closest friends and family were shocked by what he had kept hidden for so many years. Even though he was famous, Newman never thought he was truly talented. He felt like an imposter, convinced that his good looks had given him opportunities he didn't deserve. He described himself as anxious and full of doubt, always afraid that people would judge him. He knew he wasn't as good as they thought, even after starring in The Hustler in 1961 and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid in 1969. He still couldn't get rid of the feeling that he didn't belong because of how his mother treated him like a trophy instead of a son, and how his alcoholic father hurt him in ways that never fully healed. His second wife, Joanne Woodward, helped him find confidence because she saw something in him that he couldn't see in himself. Even though they told him to embrace his reputation as a sex symbol, it didn't stop him from having doubts. He always wondered if people liked him for his talent or just because of his face. In his memoir, he made it clear that he wanted to tear down the perfect image people had built around him. He wanted the world to know who he really was. His problems weren't just personal. As a father, he felt like he had failed. He had 6 kids, but admitted that he was often impatient, inconsistent, and without the weight of when his son Scott died of a drug overdose at age 28. Newman felt very guilty about his son's problems. He wondered if his own success had made things harder for Scott, and if he had felt like he had to live up to an impossible standard. Scott's death changed Newman forever and made him look at himself in ways he had never done before. But even after the tragedy, he found it hard to talk about his grief, and his daughters later said they didn't fully understand how much pain he was in. Because he never talked about it, he focused on doing things. In 1980, he started the Scott Newman Center to teach young people about drug abuse. It was his way of making his loss mean something, though it didn't take away the regret that followed him for the rest of his life. Alcohol was another battle he fought. For years, Newman called himself a functioning drunk because he drank a lot while still working, but by the 1970s, it was putting his marriage at risk. Woodward finally had enough, and they split up. He agreed to stop drinking hard liquor, but he kept drinking beer and would sometimes finish a case over dinner. His drinking not only affected his personal life, but it also shaped some of his most famous roles. In The Verdict, released in 1982, he played an alcoholic lawyer looking for redemption. The role hit close to home for him, as many of the problems his character faced were similar to those he himself was having. Even earlier movies, like Buffalo Bill and the Indians, released in 1976, showed how he dealt with alcohol in real life. Surprisingly, it wasn't acting that helped him regain control, it was racing. His journey began in 1969, when he was 43 years old and training for a movie about an old racer trying to win the Indianapolis 500. He wanted his performance to feel real, so he trained at Lime Rock Park in Connecticut. What started as practice quickly turned into something bigger. The movie featured real racing legends like Bobby Unser and Dan Gurney. And Newman found himself drawn to their world. When filming was over, he bought in 1972. He entered his first professional race, but most racers retire in their 40s. But Newman was just getting started. He approached racing with the same discipline he brought to acting. He didn't rely on his fame to open doors. He worked his way up from small competitions in the Sports Car Club of America, showing he was really good behind the wheel. Over time, he became one of the best amateur racers in the country, and by the late 1970s, he had won 7 SECR races. Newman wasn't just an actor who liked cars, he was a serious competitor. Then, in 1979, when he was 54 years old, he did one of the most amazing things in endurance racing. He competed in the 24 Hours of Le Mans, which is one of the hardest races in the world. He drove a Porsche 935 with professional racers Ralph Stalin and Dick Barber. The car had over 700 horsepower, but the race was so wet that many teams had trouble staying on the track. Newman's team pushed through and finished second overall and first in their class after 299 laps. It was an amazing accomplishment, especially for someone who started racing so late in life. His performance made headlines in the world of motorsport. He had officially proven himself on the biggest stage. Newman wasn't just a great driver, he also knew how to put together a winning team. In 1983, he teamed up with Carl Hose to form Newman Hose Racing, which quickly became one of the best IndyCar teams ever. Mario Andretti won the 1984 kart championship, showing that the team was a serious contender. In 1993, They made history again when they signed Nigel Mansell, who was the reigning Formula One champion. Mansell went on to win the IndyCar Championship that same year, which was something no other driver had ever done in their rookie season in almost 30 years. Newman's racing career took off and he won 108 races and 8 championships, but he never stopped acting. In 2006, he did his last major movie role, voicing Doc Hudson in Pixar's Cars. It was a perfect fit. The part, which was a retired race car with a legendary past. The 1951 Hudson Hornet that inspired the documentary was a dominant force in early NASCAR, and the role reflected Newman's own history in racing. He loved working on the project not only because of the racing connection, but also because of Pixar's storytelling. The film became one of the biggest hits of the year, earning $462 million worldwide. Newman retired from acting in 2007, but his voice came back in Cars 3 2017 through archival recordings by that year. Even though his health was getting worse, he was open about the fact that with age you start to lose your memory, your confidence, and your inventions, but he never lost his passion. Paul Newman was more than just a Hollywood star. He was a man who turned his struggles into something greater. He died on September 26, 2008, at the age of 83 from lung cancer. In his last moments, his wife Joanne Woodward held him as he took his last breath. His name will always be linked to classic movies like Cool Hand Luke and The Hustler, but his true legacy went beyond the screen. Unlike many actors, he never sought fame. Instead, he put family and purpose ahead of fame. His marriage to Joanne Woodward lasted 50 years, which is a rare love story in Hollywood. Together, they raised 3 daughters, Nell, Melissa, and Claire Newman. He also had 3 children from his first marriage to Jacqueline Witt. His life was not always easy. In 1978, his son Scott died of a drug overdose, which broke his heart. Instead of being sad, he took his anger and created the Scott Newman Center to help others fight substance abuse. He didn't talk much about his pain, but his actions showed how much he cared. By 2007, Newman had quit acting because his health was getting worse, but he didn't want sympathy. When rumors spread that he was sick, he laughed them off by saying he was only getting treatment for athlete's foot and hair loss. The truth was that his body was getting weaker. People who knew him well, like Melissa, who wrote in his memoir about how he struggled with self-worth, say that his childhood shaped him in ways he rarely talked about. His father was distant and demanding, and his mother smothered him with affection to the point of making him uncomfortable. These early wounds left a mark, but Newman found a way to move on. Clee, one of his daughters, says that he was truly happy when he helped others. She now works with Serious Fun's Network, a global network of camps for seriously ill children. She often feels her father's presence when she visits, knowing that his work still changes lives. One of his biggest accomplishments was co-founding Newman's Own with author A. Hotner in 1982. It all began with a simple Christmas gift. Newman made homemade salad dressing and gave bottles to his friends. They loved them so much that he decided to sell it, and the two of them put up $20,000 to get it off the ground. But for Newman, it was never about making money. Every penny of profit would go to charity. The company grew and now makes salad dressing, spaghetti sauce, popcorn, frozen pizza, lemonade, and even wine. But it wasn't just about good food. Newman added his sense of humor to the brand by writing catchy slogans like "Fine Foods Since February." People loved the products and the mission. By 2022, Newman's Own had given over $600 million to charity, with Serious Fun Children's Network receiving the largest amount. In addition to helping military families through the Fisher House Foundation and funding community projects in Kenya, Newman personally managed the donations until 2 years before he died. To make sure his mission would live on, he started the Newman's Own Foundation, which is still in use today. His vision showed that businesses could do more than just make money. They could also make a difference.